Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Capital One, offering their premium travel card, Venture X. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Details at CapitalOne.com. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
Welcome to The Spark. I'm your host, Aisha Tabb. When we think about football stories, it's usually the championships, the star athletes, or the legendary coaches that come to mind. But what about the thousands of young people whose lives are shaped by the game, even if they never play professionally? Well, that's the heart of August Heat, a new novel by author Marvin Bryson, set in the early 1980s. The book follows a young athlete coming of age as he navigates family, friendship, pressure, and the lessons that extend far beyond the football field. Marvin joins us now to share more about August Heat. Marvin, welcome back to The Spark, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
So you have a new book out, August Heat. So without giving too much away, tell us what it's about.
Well, August Heat is about playing football in the early 1980s, late 1970s. But it's not a traditional football story that's about a superstar athlete, a championship winning team, or a larger than life head coach. It's about basically the guys who don't get to go pro and the guys who don't get the scholarship to college. And I wanted to tell a football story from that point of view because I think that's where the value of the game really comes in for society.
So you said you chose the time frame of late 70s, early 80s. Why that period? Because
that's when I played. So I'm intimately familiar with that. And, the modern game is different. And there's a lot of things that happened to us then. There would be a math in there, like a coach would lose his job, and everybody. My generation kind of feels like everybody's a little sensitive. I was born in the last year of the baby boom. So coaches said things to us and did things to us that, people lose their jobs over now.
You hear that often, that so many people of that generation say that it's so soft now.
Well, I don't think it's soft. I just think the guys are so much bigger.
Yeah.
And so much faster. Like when I played, the average linebacker was like 6'2", maybe 225. That was the pro body. And you might run a 4.6 40, but now those guys are, 6'4", 250, 260, running 4.4s. That makes for one violent collision. You know what I mean? When those guys hit each other, I think it's more of a collision than we did. So,
yeah.
But it took me a while to come around to that. I'm sorry, Faith.
Yeah, that indeed does sound violent. So you shared that you chose the time period of the late 70s, early 80s, because that's when you played. So where did the idea of the story come from? Was it a little bit of your experience when you came up playing football?
Well, believe it or not, I worked in network television for a long time.
That I knew.
I started off being a film editor, so I kind of see stuff in scenes. But believe it or not, August Heat was the first screenplay I ever wrote, way back in 2002. And what happens with most people who are young writers, not necessarily young people, young screenwriters in particular, they tend to overwrite, and they tend to use too much exposition, and they try to cover too much ground. And so that actually makes for a great outline for a novel. But it took me, 20 years of writing to kind of figure that out. And also I just wanted to find a way to get the story out because I had a pretty serious illness kind of come upon me in like the late 20-teens. And so I can't really make films anymore because I don't have the strength, but I can write. And so this is my fourth book, my second novel. And I got a couple other novels in progress we can talk about later, I guess, if you want.
Well, I'm glad that you're doing better and that you're able to talk to us and that you found your way back to August Heat.
Right. Yeah. Well, it never, your scripts never really leave you because I'll add another layer to my experience. I've been playing music since I was a teenager. And when you produce a record, when you go to the studio, you have to get to a point to where you say, okay, this is enough, right? Because you could literally edit forever and never finish a project. And so that experience has helped me be a good filmmaker and also a good author. Because, at the end of the day, I know when to say enough's enough. But that still doesn't mean if you get an opportunity to come back to something, you can do that. A good example of that is a screenplay I wrote back in 2015. It got optioned in 2019. And the guy who optioned it came back to me and wanted me to polish it, add a couple of things, and change the title. So at the end of the day, until it gets produced, it's never really done.
Makes sense. You hear that a lot from producers and filmmakers where they say that film or that movie or that book I was working on, that's been 20 years in the making.
Right. Well, I think they're talking about development because when I got into the film business, I was basically 39 years old. I mean, I had already had a successful career in IT. And so I knew how to be successful in the business. You have to understand that business. And what you're talking about is development. A lot of people think, okay, filmmaking is pre-production, production, and post-production. Nothing happens without development. And like you said, that's the longest part. And that's where you get your director, your key actors, and your financing together and distribution. And unfortunately, all that stuff has to come together at one time. And it's really hard to get those five things to come together at once. So
Marvin, you shared why you came back to August Heat, right?
Right.
How much of this book draws from your own life or people that you know?
100% of it. But it's not... what I do is I do an amalgamation of characters. Like when I do my character descriptions, I'll pick one person's first name that I know and one person's last name that I know. And that kind of starts me off with the personality. And then what I'll do is I'll build their character description pretty much around their arc of what their story arc is going to be. And so even though I might use somebody's phrase or somebody's mannerisms, it's not them. They're just a part of my character. And I think that's probably true for every writer. I mean, you can't write about an emotion you never had, or you can't write about how you felt about somebody that you never met. So
inspiration everywhere. So like you said, you write about football players that never made it to the professional level, regardless of what reason that was for. Why did you choose that point of view?
Well, because it happens a lot. I'm still kind of close to my high school team. And so two of my old teammates, our high school goes to a sleepaway camp for a week. And so two of my old teammates, they buy dinner the first night and they asked folks to go down and speak to the kids. And when I was speaking to the kids, I kind of let them know that if you get a scholarship to college and you don't graduate, you got to play. You really got to play. You really wasted a great opportunity. And you're not going to college to play junior league football. You're going to college to graduate because, that's probably, 40, 50,000 Division I, Division II players, and there's only like 3,000 pros. So what are your odds of being a pro? And it's the same thing in the film game, in the writing game, and all entertainment. It's just not a lot of opportunities. And people act like, I like driving a bus, there's like 1 million jobs out here, and there's not that many jobs. So you can be talented and still not work.
How do the high school football players, how did they respond when you went and talked to them and gave them that information?
Well, I think it resonated with them because they knew I used to be a player. And the people who talk are all players. So we could talk about our experiences. Like in August Heat, Ross, my main character, his experience basically mirrors mine. I got my associate degree, but I never graduated from college. And I transferred schools a couple of times and things like that. So I just think it resonated with the kids because I wasn't somebody just talking to them about it. I had actually been through it, and I was decent when I played. I wasn't a superstar, but I was pretty good.
And that's interesting because, Marvin, you also write that football can shape and even sometimes save a person's life. What did you mean by that?
Oh, no question. I didn't grow up in the hood, but I didn't grow up in an upper class neighborhood either. I grew up in a working class neighborhood. And at the end of the day, football kind of it gave me a way to channel my aggression. So when football season was over, I just didn't have anything left. I'm proud to say I haven't been in a fight since I was 12 years old. Because unless somebody walked up to me and hit me, I was just going to walk away. But also, it kind of gives you. I hate to use this phrase because I don't think it's a black phrase, but African American phrase. But anyway, it kind of gives you street cred. You get a pass in the street. Like the guys who are out there doing the dirt, if you're a good athlete or a good musician, they kind of give you a pass. You know what I mean? You don't have to prove yourself, and so that's what I'm talking about. It gives you something else to focus on other than the fast money or Lord of the Streets. And a lot of that's informed too by the late 80s. I mean, I was in my 20s during the crack epidemic, and unless you were there, you just don't get it. I mean, it was awful. It was really awful, but there was a lot of money. I mean, a lot of guys in the street had a lot of money.
You're listening to The Spark, and I'm your host, Aisha Tabb. We've been talking with Marvin D. Bryson, author of August Heat. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Marvin to talk more about his transition from Hollywood to authorship and explore why authentic stories often come from life's unexpected detours. You're listening to The Spark. Welcome back to The Spark. I'm Aisha Tabb, and if you're just now joining us, we're talking with author and screenwriter Marvin D. Bryson about his new novel, August Heat. So with August Heat taking place in the 70s and 80s, like you said, Ross is based off your life as a young football player, trying to make it in the 80s. You also have the crack epidemic, like you said. Would you say that the lessons that are in August Heat, are they relevant today? Because you also shared in the beginning of this conversation that football has changed so much.
Well, yeah, I think it's relevant today. I think anytime you can be involved in a group situation, it's going to help you as an individual, because there's pretty much nothing in life that you can do by yourself. I mean, you're going to have to work with a team of people, and being an athlete, being a musician, being in chess club, whatever, it helps you learn how to work with other people. So that's always true. But I like to say, August Heat is about football, but it's really about Ross loving Lori. That's what August Heat is really about, and she's the female lead. So,
well, tell us a little bit about Lori.
Well, Lori is a little suburban princess, I guess, for lack of a better word, who kind of likes the bad boys. And not that Ross was a bad boy, but he was a bad boy. And her father was like that. Her father is a successful guy. They kind of raised itself up from meager beginnings to, being upper middle class. And so she's an amalgamation of 3 or 4 girls that I dated between the time I was 18 and maybe 24, 25. And I really feel like that's why a lot of the conversations that Ross and Lori have and a lot of things that they do ring true. Because Ross just always had Lori's back. No matter what happens with her, he got her, no matter who she's with, he got her, so he makes sure she's okay.
So is Lori Ross's kryptonite? Is she his major challenge?
Not at all. I don't believe in what do they say? The heart wants what the heart wants, right? And I think Lori is just his person, and I don't think Ross is necessarily Lori's first choice or Lori's choice, but Lori understands that he has her. You know what I mean? And because I think it's really hard to find 2 people that are equally in love. I think that's a nice thought, but I kind of feel like it's Mother Goose. It's some fairy tale. Somebody is always going to be a little bit more into the relationship than the other. And so it kind of shows how they navigate that. And plus, based on my experience too, you're young. When you're 17, 18, 19, 20, I don't think you can just hold on that tight. At least I didn't. I really tried to listen to what the people I was involved with said to me. And if they wanted to try something else, try somebody else, it's cool. Like go ahead, because I'm like, we're 18 years old. Yeah, it broke my heart. It threw me a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'm a Cancer, and I had this horoscope thing when I was a kid, and one of the things it said about Cancers is a Cancer's love is long and lasting, and I found that to be true with me.
So it's not just a story about football and you get lessons in that, you get lessons in young love too.
Oh yeah. That's some of my favorite parts of the book because, they go at it. I mean, Ross and Laura, they really go at it, but they go at it both ways. They go at it like desperate to love each other, but because they in the book, they go to different schools. And so she goes to school like 1,000 miles away from where they grew up. And that's one of the first things they argued about. Should they break up or not? Because with them being young and going to different schools, they're going to meet people, right? So why try to, put up this facade of I got this long distance love, you know what I mean? And again, that's just my experience because I talk to my nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters that are married. And they tell me I just don't understand marriage, right? But I think I understand marriage, but I just made a choice not to be married, because I wasn't going to live a married lifestyle. I just wasn't going to be like one guy who did the same job for 30 years to support his family. I've had three different careers and lived in 4 or 5 different states. So, and I knew that about myself.
Yeah. So becoming a novelist on that topic, right? Because before you decided to do this coming of age novel, you spent many years working in Hollywood, which we glossed over a little bit, including Law and Order. Did working in television teach you anything about storytelling?
Oh, it taught me everything I know about storytelling. It's basically, it taught me about 3-actor structure, taught me about character development, taught me about red herring. But most importantly, there's a screenwriting software called Final Draft. And in theory, a page of Final Draft equals a minute of film, final film. And the Law and Order shows, we would get 64 minutes worth of film. But we had to make it work within 42 minutes of airtime that NBC allowed us. And so I worked there for 5 years. But you know how Dick Wolf, he always has many shows on the air. And so I ended up working on like literally over 100 episodes. And in the editing room, you see how they sculpt the story down from 64 minutes to 42. It's not like they just take an axe and do it. It's like surgery, piece by piece. So the first cut might be 64, and there'll be another cut. It'll be like maybe they'll get it down to 58. Then there'll be another cut. They'll get it down to 52. And when they do cuts, what they do is they just do a cut and they send it out to producers to comment on. And writers and producers to comment on. And so, yeah, it taught me how to tell a story. I mean, and a lot of people say my books read that way because like I was saying, I see a story scene-wise. I see it visually. I'm not one of those purple prose people. I kind of try to put you in the situation where you can see it, feel it, or taste it. I don't do a whole lot of internal dialogue like a lot of writers do and stuff like that.
So your career, you kind of talked about it a little bit where it's taken some turns. Before going to Hollywood, you had a career in technology. And then you talked a little bit about caregiving, advocacy, and now novels like August Heat. Do all of these chapters in your life feel connected?
Oh, always, yeah. I mean, because I feel like we're all onions, right? And so whatever you were in that first layer is still there, even though you got many more layers. So it's not like you go to a new layer and that other layer disappears. Your experiences inform your thoughts, and your thoughts inform your writing. Because I pretty much got into authorship pretty much by accident. It wasn't a plan. I was my mom's primary caregiver for 10 years, and she had Alzheimer's and dementia. And to basically the last 3 years of her life, we had to put her in a facility, and man, that basically gutted me, putting my mom in a facility. So I ended up writing an essay in Porter Harlem magazine called Becoming Your Parents' Parent, and where I got to discuss that guilt, right? And then I'm like, it still wasn't enough for me to kind of purge it. So I wrote a book called Expectancy, a caregiver story of navigating family issues between retirement and transition. And that covered my mom's life from home care to assisted living. And after she passed, I wrote another caregiver book called Coping with Caregiving that covered the rest of it, which is skilled nursing, palliative care, hospice, and ultimately death. And then I also have a chapter on self-care, because when I wrote the first book, self-care wasn't a thing. They give you, like, and you see how healthcare, like it was 10, 12 years ago, people weren't talking about self-care. You know, self-care has become this thing recently. So that was fun. And then the book I was telling you about before that I wrote with Haywood, I said, I'm like, if I can write a book with him, I can write a book for myself, right? And being a music producer, a television producer, I just studied like novel format. You know, like what is a novel? A novel is 50 to 80,000 words, and its chapters are 2,500 to 3,000 words. That's the formula I use. And, you know, as I write, I have a metric that lets me know, matrix that lets me know how I'm progressing, you know. And when I get around 50, I'm like, okay, everything else is like really gravy when I get up to 50,000 words. But because I'm a process guy, I always have been. You know, if you don't have a process, I don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing.
That was Marvin D. Bryson, author of August Heat. Make sure you stay tuned, because after the break, we're going to find out if drone light shows are the future of summer celebrations. We'll explore